Well, a long time ago, there was a boy named Jack. And Jack wasn't very smart. What he liked to do was he liked to lay out in the fields and count the clouds and chew on a piece of straw. Made him feel really content. One day, his mama, who was freezing to death, in the dead of winter came up to him and said, she told him that he had to go and stop the northwest wind from blowing. Well, Jack, he didn't want to disappoint his mama, so he agreed that he would go and try to stop the northwest wind. So the next morning he set out, and he walked and walked a long way until finally he came to essentially the ends of the earth. And he met the northwest wind. And he said to the northwest wind, and she blew real hard. Poor old Jack, he was freezing cold. He was real dejected and he set out for home. As he walked home, an old woman came up to him and said, she presented him with a tablecloth, and she told him,
all you have to do is say, lay tablecloth leg. It'll give you as much food as you need.
Boom! Right in front of him, there was more food than he'd ever seen. There was chicken, beef, pork, and all kinds of pies and cakes. And Jack sat down and he ate and he ate and he ate. When he finished, she told him,
all you have to say is full tablecloth fold, and it'll fold up.
and that cloth folded itself up and jumped right into his arms. Well, he thanked her for the gift, but she warned him. He said, I'll never stop. And he set out. Jack walked a long, long way trying to get back home. And it was dark, cold, and he was tired. And finally he saw an inn in the distance, and he walked up to it, went inside, and he asked the woman who ran it if he could have a room. Well, Jack didn't have $20, but he said, how about this? And all of a sudden, there was more food than the woman had ever seen. Well, she called her 3 bad daughters out, and they all sat down, and they ate, and they ate, and they ate. When they were finished, Jack said, and the food disappeared, and the cloth jumped in his arms, and sure enough, he'd gotten himself a room. So he went back to his room, he laid down with his cloth, and went to sleep. Well, now that woman, she went up to her 3 daughters, and she told them, so they all went off and looked for a tablecloth that looked just like Jack's. And when they found one of the 3 daughters, they put it right next to Jack, and they took the magic tablecloth and they ran away. Well, the next morning when Jack woke up, he didn't realize that his tablecloth wasn't magic, and he set off for home with it. And he walked, so finally he got home, and when he got in the front yard, his mom came out and she said, and of course, nothing happened. Well, Jackie scratched his head, he just couldn't understand. His mama said,
Jack, what's wrong with you?
and then she told him that he was going to have to go out. And he didn't want to disappoint his mama, so the next morning he set off to stop that northwest wind. And he walked until he got to the ends of the earth. And when he came to the northwest wind, he said,
Northwest wind, you've got to stop blowing. I can't. Didn't I tell you that already?
and she blew harder than ever. Well, Jack was colder than ever and sadder than ever, and he proceeded to walk home. When out of nowhere came that old woman, and the old woman said,
Jack, what are you doing? Trying to step in the northwest wind.
and he also told her that tablecloth was no good. She asked him,
Did you stop anywhere on the way home?
and he lied to her and said no. But she took pity on him, and she told him that she had another present. And she presented him with a goat. She said, now all you have to do is pull on this goat's beard.
And say,
Give, goat, give.
give, go soon.
And give, goat, give sooner than you can imagine. That goat started spitting out gold coins. And Jack liked that. He thanked the woman for the gift. And she warned him.
Don't ever stop anywhere on the way home.
And he promised that he would not. And he set off for home. But it was dark and late and really cold. And Jack just couldn't resist going back in again. And when he went inside, the woman came up to him and he asked her for a room.
May I see room? I was in front of Alice.
And he said, and the goat started spitting out gold coins and he paid her with those. Well, that woman was mighty impressed. So Jack took his goat and went to bed. He laid down with his goat next to him and he went to sleep. That woman called the children out. And she said, so they went out to the barn and they looked for a goat that looked like Jack's. And they found one too. And they quietly sneaked inside, took Jack's goat, and left him with an old goat that couldn't do anything. Well, Jack woke up the next morning and decided he was going to go on home with his goat. And he did. And when he got home, he met his mother in the front yard and she said to him,
Jack, did you get the northwest wind to stop blowing?
and he said, give, goat, give. But do you think anything happened? No. In fact, all that goat did was butt him in the stomach and knock him down. Poor Jack, he scratched his head. He didn't understand what was going on. His mother thought he was a little touched, and she said,
Jack, what's wrong with you? Go stop the northwest wind from blowing.
and the next morning Jack did just that. He set out on that long walk, and when he finally got to the northwest wind, he went right up to her and said,
Northwest wind, you gotta stop blowing. I told you and I told you I can't.
and she blew as hard as she ever had. And Jack, it was so cold, and it was so depressing to him that everything was not turning out very well. As he started for home, the old woman came out one more time, and she said,
Jack, what are you doing?
she said, Jack, you can't stop the northwest wind.
Jack, you can't stop the northwest wind.
He said, well, those two presents you gave me were no good.
Those two presents that you gave me was no good. Did you stop anywhere on the way home?
And he lied to her again. But she took pity on him. She said she had one more present for him. It was a club. And she said, what you have to say is, play away, club, play away. And it started knocking down trees everywhere. Well, Jack liked that. He thought that was pretty impressive. She told him that all he had to do was say, stop, club, stop. And he said it. And it jumped right back into his arms. Knocked down a bunch of trees. Well, Jack liked that present. And he thanked her for it. But she warned him.
Don't ever stop anywhere on the way home.
He said, ma'am, I won't. And he set off for home. But it was cold, and he was walking through the woods, and he suddenly got an idea. So he sat down on a stump, and he thought, now wait just a minute here. See, Jack wasn't very bright, but he came up with an idea. He remembered that when he went to the inn, he had a magic tablecloth, and when he left, he didn't. And when he went to the inn, he had a magic goat, and when he left, he didn't. So he got an idea. He walked right up to that woman, and he asked her for a room. He said, I don't have any money, but watch this. Play away, club, play away. And it knocked down a bunch of trees, knocked it into 4 years' worth of firewood. Well, the woman, of course, was impressed. She gave him a room. Jack took his club, and he went to bed. But when he lay down to go to sleep, he kept one eye open the whole night. Well, that woman, she called her children out. And she said, and they went off looking for a club that would look just like Jack's. And they found one out in the forest. They brought it back. And just as they were about to take his club, he stood up and said, and the club jumped out of his arms and started beating all those people in the head. They started screaming and yelling, and they were asking Jack to stop. Please stop. And he said, well, give me my tablecloth back. And he said, give me my goat back. And they promised they would, so he said, stop, club, stop. And it jumped right back into his arms. Well, he got his goat, he got his tablecloth and his club, and he headed for home. When he got home, his mother met him in the yard, and she said to him,
Jack, did you get the Northwest Wind to stop blowing? No, ma'am, but I think I got something better.
and so he laid out the tablecloth and he said, and boom, right in front of her, there was more food than she'd ever seen. Well, the mother was amazed, and then Jack went over to his goat, pulled on his beard, and said, and gold coins started falling out of his mouth. Well, the mother couldn't believe what she was seeing. Finally, Jack said, watch this. And it jumped out of his hands and knocked down a bunch of firewood and regular wood, and Jack had enough money from the goat to build her a house so that she'd never be cold again. Well, now, if you go to those Blue Ridge Mountains of West Virginia, you can still see old Jack. You just look for a really beautiful house. He's got one. But if you look for Jack, you're going to find him laying out in the field, chewing a piece of straw, counting clouds. Now, of course, I got to tell you, they used to call him Lazy Jack. Since he got all that money, they now call him Mr. Jack.